Welcome to the AI Beehive Podcast, Real Estate and Mortgage Pros. This is your buzz for smarter tech, faster deals, and less grind. Let's get started.
Well, hi there. Welcome to the AI Beehive Podcast. My name is Ginger Bell, and I have a very special guest with me today who I am excited to have him share his expertise, and that is Jeff LaTourette. So, hi, Jeff. How are you?
I'm doing great. How are you, Ginger?
I am fantastic. Jeff, I know you have a background that's a little bit different for our audience because your background is in biology. You also have done a lot of contributions regarding comments on AI, regarding what's happening on FDA and regulations and things like that. We're going to get into that conversation. But you and I met through a group that's called the AI Collective, which is a group that started in 2023 in San Francisco, just people getting together, geeking out, having conversations about AI. And that's how you and I met, right?
That's correct.
And that's what's cool about what's happening in the world of AI is how we are able to have a lot of these conversations. So thanks for hopping on the podcast and sharing what you know.
You're very welcome.
Okay, so I am going to begin just with a very basic question, and that is if you can walk us through kind of your career journey, because, when you and I were kind of setting up for this, it's like, man, you have an amazing background, the different things you've done. So, kind of walk me through that and how you ended up into the realm of AI.
Gotcha. And so thank you very much for the kind words, Ginger. And yeah, I definitely have an unusual background, I think, compared to a lot of people involved in the organization that we met in, for sure. I actually started out as a chemist. That's what I studied in university and finished my degree in biochemistry, started doing polymer work at a startup. After that, I went on to Big Pharma. I worked in Big Pharma as a chemist in production, to making industrial scale quantities of the biomolecules mainly. So I actually made Ozempic. That was one of the drugs that I made back in the day before it got on the market and was popular. But when I did work as a chemist, I did start doing a lot of work with data. So specifically, what I did was looking at production data and seeing how can we change certain parameters to increase other parameters in the manufacturing process, the most important one being yield, right? So if you have data and we say, oh, we can tweak the pH at this one stage to increase the yield, can we do that? Can we implement that? I worked on those kind of systems. In the business, they're called process production optimizers. Working on that. And then after Big Pharma, I moved over to the software side. So the company I work for now, Biovia, is a big player in the science software space. So we work on like ELNs, inventory management, drug discovery software, stuff like that. So as I'm working on there, kind of extracurricularly, I got involved with the Pistoia Alliance. It's just a pre-competitive network of pharma professionals, basically, but mostly scientists. So I was working with a lot of scientists to submit these comments to the FDA, because one thing that the FDA will do whenever any kind of new regulation is on the table is they'll reach out to people in industry and say, hey, does anyone have experience working on this already? How are you thinking about regulation? What do you think the FDA should do? That happens all the time. In pharma, that eventually you're going to be regulated. So oftentimes what will happen is when you design a new process, you'll have a regulatory scheme kind of already set up, and you just hand it over to the FDA. They can review it. They can tweak it. So when it comes to AI, they reached out, and I had some expertise there working on data and working on science software system. Now, some of our customers have to validate their systems. It's basically anytime you have a new manufacturing process, a new drug you're going to manufacture, a new software system you're going to use. If you're using it in production, the FDA will always require that you validate it. Basically, you have to prove that it works, basically.
Right.
So the good news for everybody in that space is that overall, the validation process for AI systems is very similar to the validation processes for computer systems in general.
Okay.
A lot of the questions they're asking are the same. is this going to have an effect on the patient? Is the process going to be in control and reproducible if you use the system? So in a lot of ways, saying, hey, how are we already regulating computer systems? And then
Right.
how do we bring AI into that same fold and make any of the necessary changes? The interesting part that does create a bit of a disconnect between how pharma companies might be using these systems and how quote unquote regular companies would be is that a lot of the questions you have to ask are different. So as we were talking about before the cameras rolled, a lot of the questions that companies looking to implement AI are asking, like, oh, is this AI going to be fair? Is it going to be an unbiased system? That
Right.
is relevant to pharma companies if you're looking at something like an AI in designing a clinical trial protocol, something where
Right.
if there's bias against one particular group that has a change on patient outcome, that is a really big deal.
Oh, interesting.
But it's it's not quite to the same extent where it's just the overall fairness is what the concern is. Ultimately, it's the patient well-being is what's going to be the biggest concern. So it's really a question of framing in a lot of cases.
Yeah.
And it's not so much about if is the system explainable, because just because the system's explainable in pharma, that might not be enough. So if an AI system makes a different decision every single time, then that's unacceptable because your process isn't replicatable.
Right.
So just because it can explain its reasoning every single time, it won't be enough if it's not consistent. Because one thing that the FDA always wants to see is this process repeatable? If you do the same thing over and over again, do you get the same result? And that's absolutely crucial when it comes to a lot of your processes in pharma, especially manufacturing.
Right. So even though and a lot of with the FDA, the litmus test is real. Is it to the benefit of the patient? Is it for their best benefit? But on the other side, and especially as we see some of the decisioning made by AI, that line still needs to be there as far as the reference as is it equal? And so that part of it, and it sounds like, and this is the challenge when you get into the regulatory side, because right now, obviously on the regulatory side, is it to the benefit? But then the other side, on the decisioning side, is AI making a decision that may have an impact on one particular group. Is that correct?
Right. That is correct. And that's
Right.
what it's saying in that particular case, it's largely a question of framing because the concern is still there, but the framing is different in terms of it really being focused around patient outcomes and patient safety as opposed to kind of a more general sense of fairness. And that's really true with any application of AIs. You're going to have a different frame that you have to approach things from. Another thing that is different between how pharma uses AI and how a lot of other companies might use it is a lot of decisions that you might have an AI make are strictly technical. So in that sense, the patient well-being is very much still top of mind. It's will this decision to do a certain number of washes, maybe do 3 washes instead of 4 when you're purifying a drug. Is that something that's going to help you reach a level of quality that you need to have a product that's safe for the patient versus for AI and something like approving a loan for a mortgage? It's a completely different question. You're not really going to have that same level of explainability. And
Yeah.
so it really depends on what specifically you're using the AI for. And that line of thinking is really what led me back to the realization that it's not too different from validating a computer system, because it's all about what is the system being used for, is how the system's being used appropriate for the purpose of the system.
Right.
And so it really is a question of framing in a lot of these cases.
Well, when you're looking at, on a scientific side, and based on these drugs, a lot of them are based on numbers. So it's a numbers, it's a statistical formula. On the mortgage side, and we have organizations now, there are definitely systems that have automated the decisioning process in terms of approving a loan. The question often comes into place because when you're looking at AI and just using, ChatGPT as an example, it's a large language model and it learns over time. It learns, you teach it, it's learning from you as well as what it has from your past, what you've already provided it. But can that bias be learned by AI? And this is one of those, open-ended questions. Can that bias be learned by AI, even though you're looking at, in a decision, okay, it needs to have a 680 credit score, and it need to have, this, as far as no delinquencies. So even though the statistical side is on there, can AI have a bias? And I think on the approval side, as far as mortgages, decisioning, credit analysis, that's the bigger question that a lot in the mortgage space are having. It's like, what does that look like? And I don't know.
That's interesting. I want to ask you something about that, but first I will say that on the pharma side, one thing that you can potentially do is exclude data that you don't want it to form a bias around, like race.
Okay.
The problem with something like with doing that in pharma and something like a clinical trial is you could have certain genes that are more expressed in one population. So if this is people of West African descent more often have genes for sickle cell trait, that could be a problem for a blood medication, and then you have a risk of introducing an overcorrection if you try to correct for the bias too much and then you impair the reasoning ability of the AI. That's also a risk that always happens, and I think that is where you have no substitute for a human judgment. And humans, like, we can have those conversations with ourselves and those decision making conversations a lot better than an AI can, where you have to constantly introduce new guardrails.
Right.
Let me ask you, in the mortgage space, how are you handling that issue? Is there data that is just a best practice not to exclude? And then do you also see a problem with overcorrection? As the more you try to tell an AI you can't come to certain conclusions, then it maybe has unintended consequences elsewhere in the model.
Right. Yeah, and it's a big question. When we look at just in terms of the loan application, it does include those questions as far as race and ethnicity. And so, when you look at that, because it's obtaining that information, doesn't mean it's used at all in any decisioning, but yet you're feeding it with that information. So, when you put those, as you say, guardrails in on the back end, not to make sure you're overcompensating, because, there's obviously the sides of redlining and discrimination that can come into lending. So, those are the things that are up for discussion and are things to definitely watch for in organizations as they start implementing some of these AI processes into their business, what that looks like, and to make sure that they're not 100% reliant on the decisioning of AI. And I think that's kind of the space we're in right now, because you're seeing that on your side is what you're doing with pharma, and we're seeing that definitely on our side on the mortgage space. I'm going to pivot a little bit because I know you have helped some organizations just in terms of best practices and AI and things like that. And we had a little discussion about AI and how organizations can really bring AI into their business. So what are you seeing or what are you reading as far as, organizations when they start adopting or looking at how to bring AI into their business? What's a successful way to do that as, let's say a mid-sized, not a big pharma company, but a mid-sized company? What should they be doing right now?
Well, I think it very much depends on what problem you're trying to solve. So
Mhm.
it doesn't make sense to use an LLM to solve a problem that can be solved with a trend line. So it's if you don't have a need for state of the art AI system, then I would say err on the side of not implementing it, because any software that you implement in your organization, you have to train people on it. There's going to be a
Right.
cost to maintain that software. So it's not always the best option. I would say for companies that are trying to do it in one way or another, have a very good idea of the problem that it will solve and have good data to show, hey, this will actually solve this problem. So one company I knew is using AI to do drug discovery stuff, and they've seen a huge increase in productivity and the number of molecules that they've been that have moved on to the preclinical phase. So if you have a good system to do that, you've run a pilot project to show that that'll be good to implement across your organization. That's really the space that you want to be in if you are going to implement AI organization wide. I would say for any AI that you're using, a pilot project is 100% essential. If you've tried it out a little bit and you say, hey, this might be promising, do a small scale project and see if we do a project that's well documented, we have good data, and we approach it scientifically, and we get the results we want. That's really going to be the sign that this is going to be good for you to implement across your organization, or maybe even across one segment of your organization. Because
Right.
if you only have to train 50 people on this AI tool, let's say it's just the finance department you have to train versus the entire company, 500 people, the entire company is going to be the more difficult route to go. So it
Yeah.
really depends on what you're using. I've seen a lot of companies just using AI in the sense of using it to write certain reports quicker. A lot of like lower level people say, hey, I don't need to spend 2 hours writing this. I can spend 20 minutes writing it because I can have AI do the first draft, and I can just swap out all the names of any sensitive intellectual property. So that's a really agile way to go about it. If you're
Mm-hmm.
doing something like implementing AI company wide for drug discovery, or you're implementing AI to help you select people for a mortgage, like that's something where it requires a lot bigger project and a lot less agile kinds of planning than if you were to just have AI write a report for you.
Yeah. And I think the challenge, and thank you for that. I love that you said, it started as pilots. So many times people don't, begin with that. They see a shining object and say, oh, wow, look what this can do. And then, try to implement it across their organization, and it's not adopted, or the training, whatever reason. So thinking about that. And also, I think collectively, looking at how it can have an impact on your entire organization. So, putting together an AI task force and being able to identify where are the places in your organization where AI can increase productivity, or to be able to, provide, streamline processes, whatever that is, and then take the time to look at it. It's one of the things, the reason that we created the AI Beehive is a directory to find those different tools, because that's one of the biggest challenges. There's so many new things that are popping up and are changing so rapidly that just staying on top of everything that's happening is overwhelming for a lot of people. And so, having a task force to be able to slow down a little bit and take the time, I think, is important.
100%. I think if you have a task force at a very high level, like, if in your board meeting, you get the whole board together, the whole C-suite together, and say, hey, we're going to have an extra meeting and we're going to go through our whole organization and see where can we implement AI to save us time, money, or both. That's a fantastic idea. And then to bring on the heads of all the different departments onto that task force for A, the brainstorming, and B, because we don't want to implement an AI tool in finance and then QA says, wait, like we could have benefited from that. But then you don't
Right.
realize until, because you didn't think about that right away. That's a fantastic idea. And I think if you get that task force together and you start with the use cases and then take a scientific approach to designing either one pilot that covers multiple different use cases or one pilot project for each use case, that's going to be the best way to go. And you're going to see the most success when you do that.
Yeah. So, is there something that you've started using AI wise in your professional or personal life that you would say, hey, this is one thing that is a game changer? You know, for me, I use ChatGPT a lot. We went on a trip recently up the southern Oregon coast. And so I was talking into ChatGPT as we were driving and saying, hey, I'm going from this point to this point. Tell me some of the sites I need to see along the way. And so, you know, it would suggest, hey, you should stop here, you should stop here. And, you know, it's so much easier than going to Google and then searching through it. So for me, on a personal level, I have really started implementing a lot of that into my business. How about you?
I would say the same. I'm big on ChatGPT. I use all the different models depending on what I'm asking it. I've found it to be a a great extension of Google in the same way that Google is a great extension of going to the library and looking things up in the
Yeah.
index. So I remember when I first started coding in high school, be like, oh, you know, I used Google and I did my whole project in 2 days because I found some code on Stack Overflow and I could change it. And now it's like with ChatGPT, it's like, oh, I could do the whole project in 2 hours because it spits me out the first draft. And then I can just tweak it and I can use Google to say, okay, you know, it hallucinated here. This is wrong. So like, let me go find the exact code that or a package that I'd actually need to implement here. Uh, and I will also say I'm not the most AI forward person. Like I'm not jumping to try out a new tool every time one drops, but
Yeah.
uh, I would say ChatGPT has been really essential for me in a couple ways. One, with tutoring, as I've tried to increase my knowledge in statistics and machine learning and stuff like that. You know, if I'm taking a course online, I'll have ChatGPT up right there, and that's my tutor. You know, so I can ask it things where I don't understand, have it explain to me. Have it explain certain things to me in certain ways. So that's where the different models really come in handy. Where if I want a more technical code heavy explanation, I could use O3, but if I want just the general idea, maybe I'll use 4.0. The other thing
Yeah.
I use it for is a lot of nutrition and fitness advice. So like I'm making a fitness, like I surf, play volleyball, lift weights, and I'll ask Chat GPT a lot of stuff or get ideas for workouts and stuff like that. And you do have to be careful. I haven't got any information that I could see was incorrect. I do know people have used it for mechanic advice and got procedures that were wrong. So you definitely have to you don't want to do
Double check.
something on your car and then you break it. Though I will say, for me, troubleshooting stuff on my car has been a great use case for ChatGPT.
Interesting.
And
Okay.
but the thing is knowing when it's wrong or when it's telling you to do something that could break your car, break your computer,
Yeah.
etc. That's a whole skill set in and of itself. And uh, I've noticed that for me, at least, there's a certain je ne sais quoi with that, where sometimes you can just be like, I don't think this is right, but you can't really explain why.
Yeah. I'm not sure
And
why.
so, and you with code, it can be quite dangerous to do that. Because I remember one time I was taking this Python class and I was trying to calculate pi to a very high number of digits. Which you can't do normally in Python through normal calculations because your operating system's only 64 bits. So as I'm doing that, I realized if I hadn't been careful, I could have put myself in a situation where I started my program and it would just never stop
Yeah.
calculating, and then you have to do a hard shutdown. And so it's you can get yourself in situations like that. I've heard of people who followed mechanic procedures exactly and messed it up. And I think with that, it's something that's very similar to how we're seeing AI being discussed in the medical field, where there's certain
Yeah.
use cases for AI, but ultimately, if you were a new surgeon and you typed in, "Oh, how do I take out someone's appendix?" and you followed it, like that's not going to fly. And
Yeah.
and the thing is when you get to that level of expertise, like if you're a surgeon or you're someone like me who's been in pharma for many years and trained as a scientist, that is a level of expertise be really beyond what we see current LLMs at. And a lot of LLMs are
Right.
basically it's like a PhD student. So as a tutor for something that you don't know well, it's really great. But if you've been in your field for 20 years and you're an expert, the AI is probably not going to know more than you. It just might have a wider breadth of knowledge that you can then draw from. So, there's a lot of stuff with chemistry that, because I didn't use it in my professional career, I'm pretty much more like a beginner. Like when it comes to molecular orbitals, for instance, I never worked with molecular orbitals after college. So that's something where if I
Yeah.
wanted a refresher, I'd go to ChatGPT. But when it comes to my bread and butter, like FDA regulations in the pharmaceutical industry, I'm at a level of expertise beyond what ChatGPT could give me. Though it can be a really great starting point in the same way that Wikipedia is. If I graduated high school in 2010, so first step for any book report or history essay, whatever, was Wikipedia. And I can't cite Wikipedia, but there's a whole bunch of citations here that I can maybe use for my essay. I feel like ChatGPT is very much the same way. And anything that you're learning, it's generally very, very good because it does have a pretty high level of knowledge at this point.
Yeah. And then if you question it, you can go and double check it. So those are things too. And I think important to remember, don't just rely on it as cold, hard facts.
Right. Yeah, exactly. You always have to take it with a grain of salt.
Mhm.
And that was even true with just with regular writing of essays. If you have one source,
Mhm.
you always want to cross-reference it because you don't know the accuracy of that source. It could have passed peer review, but there still could be errors in it. You always want to cross-reference your sources. So if it's something that's very important like that, or you're using it to help you on a research project or something, it'd always be a first step. And then you always need to cross-reference your sources.
Yeah, but it's important. It's just on a side note, I have a hummingbird feeder in my backyard. We have a lot of hummingbirds, and my husband got me the one that has the camera in it. And so it has AI that will detect the type of bird, and you'll get a report on your phone saying, "Hey, we detected." And there was one the other day. It said it was a red-headed woodpecker that AI had detected. It's like, nope, that's a hummingbird. So those are the kind of things that it's like, yeah, it's not always 100% right. So
Yeah,
that's
it
important.
definitely not. And for something like that, it's okay that it's not 100% correct.
Right.
Nobody's going to die because it goes wrong, or your car is not going to blow up
Yeah.
because you got wrong information from the AI. And when it comes to building an AI task force and determining how you're going to use AI in your organization, that's another key question to ask: is how important is it that this is right? How important is it that this isn't double checked? Especially in 2025, there's been a lot of talk about AI agents. That's always one of the most difficult things with AI is if AI gets it wrong, but then me as a human can double check it, ultimately the buck stops with me.
Right.
So as you're building AI agents, that's a different question that you need to ask: is how often is this going to be accurate? Do I need to double check this? What does that process look like? How do I incorporate that into an automated workflow? Again, it all depends on what you're trying to use the AI for and what level of autonomy you need it to have.
Yeah, 100%. Well, Jeff, amazing conversation. I knew it was going to be. So thank you so much. We could go on for probably another hour here on this conversation. So we'd love to have you back on again.
Absolutely.
If our audience wants to get in touch with you, how can they reach you?
And the best way to reach me is LinkedIn. So
Okay.
Ginger has my LinkedIn, so you could put
Yep.
that in the
We'll
description.
include that.
Just connect with me, send me a DM. I check it pretty regularly, and all
Yep.
kinds of business inquiries for consulting, or if you want to have a conversation with me about whatever, like LinkedIn's a great way to get a hold of me.
Yeah, absolutely. I know. And I have so enjoyed getting to know you. I look forward to hopefully seeing you at a live AI collective meeting sometime in the future.
Likewise.
Yeah. And so thank you so much. And for those of you tuning in, make sure to go to the AIBeehive.com and get some more information about AI. So thanks, Jeff, and we'll see you all soon.
Thanks, Ginger. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for tuning in to the AI Beehive Podcast, where real estate and mortgage pros get the buzz on all things AI. Don't forget to subscribe, share the buzz, and visit www.aibeehive.com to keep building your smarter business. Until next time.